Imani Caldwell wiped her hands on the hem of her worn jeans, squinting against the harsh midday sun that bounced off the cracked asphalt of Henson's Auto and Tire. The smell of motor oil, burnt rubber, and hot metal hung thick in the air, mingling with the faint scent of exhaust from the cars idling outside. She hated the heat, hated the way it made her palms sweat under greasy gloves, but she had learned long ago that complaining didn't help. Survival did. And that meant paying attention, noticing the small things most people overlooked. She was just finishing sweeping a line of metal shavings toward the corner of the garage when the rumble began. Low, uneven, just enough to prick at the edges of her nerves. She froze mid-sweep, brush hovering, ears straining. It wasn't the usual clunk of an old engine. This was different. Something in her chest tightened, a sensation she knew too well: danger. The SUV pulled into the lot. Dark gray, gleaming in the sunlight, deceptively calm. The driver stepped out, a man in his early 40s with a crisp button-down and a phone pressed to his ear. He didn't notice her at first, pacing impatiently while he barked into the call. His shoes clicked against the pavement, sharp and confident, and the smell of his cologne mixed strangely with the hot metal around him. Imani's stomach twisted. The fluid she smelled, faint, acrid, made her stomach drop further. Her mind raced. Years of past experiences with cars, accidents, and near misses kicked in. She had learned to trust that gut feeling even when everyone else dismissed it. Her voice shook slightly when she spoke up. "Sir?" The man didn't respond. He was too absorbed in his call, too wrapped up in his own urgency. She stepped closer. "Sir, stop. There's something wrong with your car." The click of his heels slowed as he turned, eyebrows drawn together in disbelief. "What?" Her throat tightened, but she forced herself to speak clearly. "Your fuel line. It's leaking near the exhaust. You shouldn't drive it." He laughed, sharp and short like the sound of a car backfiring. "I don't need a teenager telling me how to handle my car. I've been driving longer than you've been alive." Imani's fingers itched to reach for the SUV herself, to check the line, to do something before it was too late. But she didn't. She had been here before. Once, when she tried to warn someone about worn brake pads, her boss had scolded her for scaring people. And that was just the tip of it. "I'm not trying to scare you," she said, her voice firmer now. "I'm trying to stop you from getting hurt." The man's jaw tightened. "I don't have time for this." Imani's eyes flicked toward the undercarriage, where the faintest wisp of smoke curled against the asphalt. Her heart lurched. Not imagination. She had smelled this before in nightmares she hadn't spoken of, the smell of fuel too close to heat, the promise of flames. Her boss, Gordon Henson, appeared from the office, wiping his hands on a rag. "What's going on here?" "This girl," the man said, dismissive, "claims my car is about to explode." Gordon's lips pressed into a thin line as he glanced at Imani. "Imani, I told you not to bother customers." "But," she started. The man shook his head. "Unbelievable." He moved toward his SUV again, keys in hand, ready to leave. Imani's chest pounded. She swallowed, forcing herself to step forward. "Sir, please, just don't drive it." The engine roared to life. Her stomach dropped. The rumble was uneven now, louder, more insistent. She stepped back instinctively. And then the first spark appeared, tiny but terrifying, beneath the hood. Smoke coiled upward, a warning she had prayed she would never see again. "Gordon," she shouted, panic threading her voice. "Fire extinguisher." People nearby began to notice, moving back instinctively. The man slammed the brakes, panic finally registering on his face. Flames licked the metal, thin and bright at first, then hungrily spreading under the hood. Imani's pulse hammered in her ears. She froze for a second, caught between fear and disbelief, and then instinct took over. She grabbed a nearby extinguisher and ran forward, shaking with adrenaline. The fire hissed as the chemical sprayed, smoke filling her nose, but the flames began to retreat. When it was finally over, the SUV sat scarred and blackened, the acrid smell lingering. The man was pale, shaking, and for the first time looking at her not with anger but fear. "You were right," he said, voice quiet, almost reverent. Imani nodded, too stunned to respond. Her hands shook, but inside, a strange mix of fear and vindication settled. She had seen it. She had acted. She had survived. And somewhere deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. If you're enjoying this story so far, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what happens next. I promise the twists coming are going to shock you. Also, comment below where you're watching from. I'd love to know which city is catching this drama first. The parking lot didn't go back to normal after the fire. It couldn't. Even after the smoke thinned and the extinguisher was returned to its hook, something invisible stayed behind, hanging in the air like a held breath. Imani stood near the edge of the garage, arms wrapped tightly around herself. Her shirt clung to her back with sweat, and her hands still trembled no matter how hard she tried to steady them. The smell lingered, burnt rubber, scorched metal, and underneath it all, that sharp, unmistakable scent she wished she could erase from her memory. People talked all at once. "Did you see that? That thing almost blew," she warned him. "I heard her." The man, Jonathan Pierce, though she didn't know his name yet, leaned against the side of his SUV, staring at the charred hood as if it had personally betrayed him. His phone lay forgotten in his hand, the screen dark. His confidence had drained away, replaced by something raw and shaken. Gordon broke the silence with forced cheer. "Well, looks like you're lucky someone caught it early." Jonathan turned slowly. "Lucky?" His voice cracked slightly. "That was inches from killing me." Gordon cleared his throat. "I mean..." Jonathan's eyes drifted back to Imani. She felt the weight of his gaze before she looked up. When their eyes met, she expected anger or maybe embarrassment. Instead, she saw something that made her chest tighten. Fear. "You smelled it?" he said suddenly. It wasn't a question. Imani nodded. "And heard it?" "Huh." He ran a hand through his hair, still staring at the SUV. "I've had this car checked 3 times this year. No one mentioned anything like that." She didn't answer. She knew better than to sound defensive. Jonathan exhaled slowly, then turned to Gordon. "I want a full inspection. Everything. Right now." Gordon nodded quickly. "Of course. We'll take care of it." As Jonathan walked toward the office, he hesitated, then looked back at Imani. "You," he said. "What's your name?" Her throat felt dry. "Imani." "Well," he said, holding her gaze, "thank you, Imani." 2 words. Simple. But they landed heavier than any apology ever had. She watched him disappear inside the office, her heart still racing. Around her, people slowly returned to their cars or back into the shop, the excitement fading into murmurs and headshakes. Gordon approached her, expression unreadable. "You okay?" She nodded. "Yeah." He studied her for a moment, then sighed. "You did good. Just, next time let me handle it, all right?" Imani bit back a response and nodded again. She'd learned when to speak and when silence was safer. The rest of the afternoon dragged. Every time an engine started, her shoulders tensed. Every sharp smell made her stomach clench. By the time her shift ended, her head throbbed with exhaustion. At home, the duplex felt quieter than usual. Her mother, Angela, was already in her scrubs, lacing her shoes for the night shift. "You're late," Angela said gently. "Busy day," Imani replied, dropping her backpack by the door. Angela paused, studying her daughter's face. "You look pale." Imani hesitated, then shook her head. "I'm fine." Angela didn't push. She rarely did. Instead, she hugged her briefly, the familiar scent of antiseptic and laundry soap grounding Imani for a moment before her mother headed out. Left alone, Imani collapsed onto her bed. The ceiling fan hummed above her, slicing the air in steady rhythms. She closed her eyes, and the fire came back. Not the one from today. The other one. Louder. Hotter. Closer. Her chest tightened as the memory crept in, screaming metal, smoke filling her lungs, hands pounding against a door that wouldn't open fast enough. She sat up abruptly, gasping, sweat breaking out across her skin. Not now, she whispered to herself. She stood and opened the window, letting cool evening air wash over her face. The distant sounds of traffic drifted in, ordinary and harmless. Slowly her breathing steadied. Her phone buzzed on the bed. Unknown number. She frowned, then answered. Hello. Is this Imani Caldwell? A calm male voice asked. Yes. My name is Caleb Morris. I'm calling regarding the incident at Henson's Auto earlier today. Her stomach dropped. What about it? There was a brief pause. I'd like to ask you a few questions. Nothing urgent, but important. Imani stared out the window at the darkening street. How did you get my number? Public record, he replied smoothly. And a bit of curiosity. She didn't like that answer. What kind of questions? She asked carefully. The kind that suggest what happened today may not have been an accident. Her heart skipped. I don't understand, she said. I think you do, Caleb replied. You noticed something no one else did. And I'd like to know why. The line went quiet for a moment, just long enough for unease to settle in her chest. We can talk tomorrow, he added. If you're willing. Imani swallowed. And if I'm not? Another pause. Then this gets more complicated than it needs to be. The call ended. Imani lowered the phone slowly, her reflection faint in the dark window. Outside, a car backfired somewhere down the street and she flinched hard. She had saved a stranger today. But it was becoming painfully clear that whatever she'd stepped into wasn't over. It was just starting. Imani's eyes stayed glued to the window long after the phone call ended. The streetlights flickered as evening settled over Dayton, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement outside. She couldn't shake the voice, calm but deliberate, that had spoken her name. Caleb Morris. There was something about it that unsettled her. Not threatening, exactly, but precise, like a predator calculating every move. She sank back onto her bed, hugging her knees. Her thoughts kept circling the day's events. The SUV. The fire. Jonathan Pierce. Everything had happened so fast, but she remembered it all in agonizing detail. The hiss of the flames, the acrid smell of burnt rubber, the way the man had frozen when he realized she was right. That moment, her voice saving someone, should have been empowering. Instead, it left her drained, like every nerve ending had been scorched along with the car. Imani knew she wasn't like other teenagers. She'd learned to notice things most people ignored. A smell, a sound, the tiniest irregularity. Today had proven it. And now someone else had noticed too. Caleb Morris. You wanted to talk. She wasn't sure if she wanted to. The next morning at Henson's Auto, the heat pressed down again, heavier than the day before. The lot smelled of oil and dust, and the sun reflected sharply off the metal roofs. Gordon had called her into the garage before opening, his expression unreadable. You're meeting someone, he said without preamble, tossing a manila envelope onto the workbench. Call it an opportunity. Or trouble. Maybe both. Imani frowned, reaching for the envelope. Inside was a card. Caleb Morris, Insurance Investigations, with a phone number neatly typed below. Before she could question him, the bell above the front door jingled. A man stepped in. Tall, navy blazer, calm eyes, hands folded neatly in front of him. Every detail screamed control. You must be Imani Caldwell, he said. His voice was smooth like glass over gravel. Yes, she said cautiously. Caleb Morris, he introduced himself. Thank you for agreeing to speak with me. Imani's instinct told her to retreat, to make an excuse to get away. But something deeper pulled her forward. Maybe curiosity. Maybe responsibility. Do you want coffee? She asked impulsively, surprised at the politeness in her own voice. Caleb smiled faintly. No, thank you. Let's get straight to the point. They moved to the back of the garage, past the rows of cars in various states of repair. Tires leaned against walls, grease-stained rags hung on hooks, and the faint hum of machinery provided a low, constant backdrop. About the SUV yesterday, Caleb began, his tone neutral but firm. You noticed something most people wouldn't? And that's why I'm here. Imani hesitated. I smelled something. Heard something. That's all. Not all, he countered. You reacted to it. Instinctively. And instinct matters. Very much. Imani glanced at him. Why does this matter to you? Caleb leaned slightly closer, lowering his voice. Because what happened yesterday may not have been an accident. Her stomach dropped. What do you mean? I mean, he continued carefully, there's evidence suggesting the fuel line was compromised intentionally. Not by mistake. Someone wanted that car to fail. The words settled in her chest like a stone. She couldn't breathe properly for a moment. Who would do that? She whispered, her voice barely audible over the distant clanging of tools. That's what I need your help to figure out, Caleb said. I know it sounds strange, but you saw things that no one else did. And that makes your observations valuable. Imani's mind raced. Every warning she had ever given, every moment someone dismissed her instincts, flashed in her memory. She had always been right even when no one believed her. She swallowed hard. You want me to investigate? She asked, her voice small but steady. I want you to share what you noticed, Caleb clarified. Every detail counts. How the car sounded, smelled, the fluid, the engine's rhythm. Everything. If this was intentional, the more information we have, the safer people will be, including you. Imani swallowed. She wanted to say no. She wanted to retreat into her routine, into safety. But the memory of the fire, the hiss of flames licking metal, made her shake her head. She couldn't. I'll help, she said finally. Caleb's eyes held a flicker of approval. Good. That's all I ask for now. We'll take it step by step. You're not alone in this. A car horn blared outside, startling her. She jumped, a shiver crawling down her spine. The day's events, the fire, and now this, it all felt like a thread pulling her toward something bigger than herself. As Caleb packed up to leave, he added one more thing. Imani, trust your instincts. They're more accurate than most people think. And you might need them sooner than you expect. She watched him go, his polished shoes clicking against the concrete floor, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than before. Imani returned to sweeping the garage, trying to pretend it was just another day. But her hands shook, her mind racing. Something told her this was only the beginning, and that the danger might be closer than she realized. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She ignored it this time, but the pit in her stomach told her it wouldn't stay ignored for long. And outside, the SUV still sat in the lot, blackened and scarred, a silent reminder that even the smallest oversight could have life-changing consequences. Imani wiped her palms on her jeans again, trying to steady herself. She had survived the fire yesterday. But now she was being pulled into a story far larger, and far more dangerous, than she had ever imagined. And somewhere deep inside she realized one truth. Sometimes noticing what others miss isn't a gift. It's a responsibility. Imani didn't sleep well that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she imagined the SUV, smoke curling from the hood, the faint hiss of flame that could have ended everything in seconds. Her bedroom felt smaller than usual, the ceiling fan spinning lazily above her as if mocking her restless thoughts. She rolled over, pulling the thin blanket closer, and her phone buzzed again, another unknown number. She let it go to voicemail, deciding she didn't have the energy to confront whatever waited on the other end. By morning, the heat had returned with a vengeance. Dayton's sun scorched the asphalt, and the smell of oil and exhaust was already thick in the air. Henson's auto felt almost oppressive, the hum of machinery and clatter of tools more pronounced in the heavy heat. Gordon appeared before the doors opened, rubbing his eyes and muttering about a long day ahead. "You've got a visitor," he said, nodding toward the lot. "And I don't mean another car." Imani squinted toward the entrance. Jonathan Pierce stood there, arms crossed, brow furrowed, looking every bit the man in control who'd been so rattled the day before. But now he carried something new, a file folder thick with papers, his expression unreadable. "Morning," he said, his tone clipped. He didn't bother with pleasantries. "I want to go over the car. Everything. Right now." Imani felt her chest tighten. She had expected him to leave town, to brush off yesterday as an unfortunate inconvenience. But here he was back with a level of determination that made her uneasy. Gordon opened the garage door and gestured for him to follow. "We'll start with diagnostics," he said. Imani hung back, watching him walk toward the SUV. Something about the way he moved, controlled, deliberate, yet cautious, made her uneasy. She had saved him from fire, but now she realized she might be stepping into something much bigger than a mechanical issue. Jonathan knelt by the car, flipping open the hood. Imani stepped closer, trying not to breathe too loudly, not to startle him. "You're familiar with cars, right?" he asked, glancing up at her. I help out," she replied cautiously. "Mostly diagnostics and minor repairs." He nodded slowly, then returned his attention to the engine. "Good. Because I want your eyes on this. And your nose too, if that's what it takes. I need to know exactly what went wrong yesterday." Imani swallowed. Every fiber of her body told her to be careful. But she could see what he couldn't, not just the burn spots under the hood, but the faint traces of fluid that suggested the leak had been more than mechanical failure. She had smelled it, had known it. "Follow me," she said quietly. She knelt beside the tire and traced a finger along the undercarriage, careful not to touch anything too hot. Jonathan watched silently. "Here. This is where the line was leaking. Look at the metal here. It's scorched, but not like its normal wear. Something forced it." He leaned closer, brow furrowed. "Forced it? You mean someone did this on purpose?" Imani shrugged. "I don't know who. But that's what it looks like." Jonathan straightened, his expression hardening. "Do you have any idea who would?" He cut himself off, shaking his head. "Never mind. I don't want to assume anything yet." They spent the next hour inspecting every inch of the SUV, Imani pointing out subtle irregularities, Jonathan scribbling notes. The more she spoke, the more she realized just how serious this was. Someone had tampered with the vehicle, and they had almost killed him. As they wrapped up, a loud horn blared from the street. Both jumped slightly. A delivery truck had skidded to a stop, nearly hitting the edge of the lot. Jonathan cursed under his breath, running a hand over his face. Imani felt the adrenaline spike in her veins again. Her senses were on high alert. It was never just the cars anymore. It was the people, the environment, the tiniest details that could signal danger. Jonathan finally turned to her, his voice quieter now, almost tentative. "You saved me yesterday. Do you understand how serious that was?" She nodded. "I know." He paused, studying her for a moment longer than comfortable. "I want to understand how you knew. Not just the smell or the sound, but everything." Imani hesitated. She wanted to say more, to explain, but the words caught in her throat. Some things weren't just mechanical knowledge. They were memories she hadn't shared with anyone, not even her mother. Before she could answer, Gordon cleared his throat. "Lunch break's over. We've got other cars waiting." Jonathan exhaled, leaning against the SUV. "Right. We'll finish this later." He gave her a small nod, a mixture of gratitude and something else she couldn't place, then walked toward the office. Imani stayed by the SUV, her hands still trembling slightly. She traced the charred metal with her fingers one last time, thinking about what Caleb Morris had said on the phone and the new questions swirling in her mind. This wasn't just about a car anymore. Someone had tried to harm Jonathan Pierce, and somehow she was caught in the middle. As she wiped her palms on her jeans, a new unease settled over her. She didn't know it yet, But this day would set in motion a chain of events she couldn't control, and each step forward would bring her closer to truths she might not be ready to face. A soft buzz came from her phone in her pocket. A known number again. Imani's hand froze. She knew answering it could change everything. The parking lot was quiet now, almost deceptively so. The SUV sat like a wounded animal, its blackened hood still faintly steaming in the morning sun. Imani stood a few feet away, hands on her hips, breathing slowly, trying to steady the lingering tremor in her chest. Every muscle ached, and her mind refused to stop replaying the moment when the fire had flared. Jonathan Pierce was back inside the office, typing away on his laptop, papers scattered across the desk in front of him. He didn't notice her at first, lost in numbers and emails, probably calculating the cost of the nearly destroyed SUV. But Imani didn't care about the money. She cared about what had almost happened, and the fact that it wasn't an accident. "Imani," Gordon called from behind her, voice low but firm. "I need you back in the shop. Lunch is over." She nodded but didn't move immediately. Her gaze stayed on the SUV, tracing every scar, every burned edge. She could still see the faint line of fluid along the undercarriage where the leak had started, still fresh enough to make her stomach twist. She moved toward it cautiously, crouching low to inspect it further. That's when she noticed it, a small scratch near the fuel line that hadn't been there yesterday. Tiny, almost invisible, but deliberate. Someone had been in there after the fire. Imani's pulse quickened. She stood abruptly, glancing around the lot. No one was near, just the hum of the city in the distance, the occasional honk of a horn from the street. But the realization hit her like a punch to the stomach. This wasn't over. Whoever had tampered with the SUV once could do it again. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She hesitated, then pulled it out. A known number. She stared at it, heart hammering. Finally she answered. "Imani Caldwell?" "Yes," she said, voice tight. "Good," said a calm male voice. "This is Caleb Morris. I need you to come somewhere quiet. There's more to discuss about yesterday." Imani felt a chill run down her spine. "Why not here?" "Because this involves information you shouldn't hear where anyone could overhear," Caleb said, his tone urgent but controlled. "Meet me at the cafe on Main Street in 30 minutes. And come alone." She swallowed, glancing back at the SUV one last time. Then she nodded. "I'll be there." The cafe was small, tucked between a laundromat and a corner bookstore. Inside, the smell of coffee and baked goods was warm and familiar, almost comforting against the tension in her chest. Caleb was already seated at a corner table, laptop open, eyes scanning the street outside as if he expected someone to appear at any moment. "Good you came," he said without looking up. "Sit." Imani slid into the chair across from him, clutching her backpack in her lap. "What's this about?" Caleb closed the laptop slowly. Yesterday's fire wasn't an accident. Her stomach dropped. She had expected him to say that, but hearing it aloud made it real. Someone did this on purpose? Yes. And not just to destroy property, he said, leaning closer. They wanted to hurt Jonathan Pierce. And by extension, you. Imani blinked. "Me? Why me?" "Because you were the only one who could stop it," Caleb said. "You have a rare ability to notice what others don't. And the person behind this, they notice too. They'll be watching for you now that you've intervened." Fear prickled along her spine. The SUV, the fire, Jonathan, Caleb, everything was connected, and she had unknowingly stepped into it. Caleb slid a folder toward her. Inside were photos of the SUV's undercarriage, close-ups of the scratches, the leak, the scorched areas. He pointed to them. "See this? Someone deliberately weakened the fuel line. And these scratches suggest they accessed the car after the fire, trying to cover their tracks." Imani traced the images with her finger. Her mind raced. Who would do this? And why? "You need to be careful," Caleb said, voice softening. "You're not just helping investigate. You're part of the equation now. What you do next could change everything." The cafe door jingled and Imani's eyes snapped to the entrance. A man in a gray hoodie stepped in, scanning the room quickly. Something about him made her stomach lurch. He didn't approach, didn't linger, but the glance he gave her felt deliberate, measured. Then he was gone, swallowed by the street outside. Imani exhaled sharply, gripping the edge of the table. Caleb noticed but said nothing. "You're right," she said finally, her voice steadier than she felt. "This isn't just a car problem. Someone wanted to hurt him, and almost succeeded. And now maybe they'll try again." Caleb nodded. "Exactly. And that's why we need to be smart. Watch and wait. Record what you notice. Trust your instincts, they've saved lives already." Imani stared at the photos again, her fingers tracing the lines of metal that had almost killed Jonathan. She realized something terrifying. The world was suddenly bigger and darker than she had imagined, and she was in the middle of it. As she left the cafe, the sunlight felt harsh against her eyes, shadows long across the sidewalk. She glanced over her shoulder automatically, half expecting to see the man in the gray hoodie again. Nothing. But deep down she knew this wasn't over. Someone had targeted Jonathan Pierce. And by saving him she had painted a bullseye on herself as well. The day stretched ahead, full of possibilities and dangers that she couldn't yet understand. And somewhere in the back of her mind she felt the faintest trace of fear, that the next move wouldn't just be dangerous, could be deadly. Imani returned to Henson's auto with the uneasy feeling that she was walking back into a place that no longer felt safe. The garage sounded the same, metal clanging, air compressors hissing, Gordon shouting instructions. But everything felt sharper now, louder, as if her senses had been turned up without her consent. She kept replaying the cafe scene in her head. The photos, the scratches, the way Caleb's voice had lowered when he said someone might be watching her. She told herself she was imagining things, that fear had a way of exaggerating shadows. Still, she checked behind her twice before pushing open the shop door. Jonathan's SUV was gone. The empty space in the lot hit her harder than she expected. She stood there for a moment, staring at the oil-stained patch of asphalt where the car had been. The absence felt wrong, like walking into a room and realizing a piece of furniture had been moved in the dark. "Looking for something?" Gordon asked, appearing beside her. "The SUV," she said. "Where did it go?" "Tow truck picked it up about an hour ago," he replied. "Insurance people. Fast ones." Imani's stomach tightened. "Did anyone say where they were taking it?" Gordon shrugged. "Some secured facility. I didn't ask questions." She nodded, but unease crept deeper into her chest. Caleb had said they needed to watch and wait. Now the main piece of evidence was already gone. The rest of her shift passed in fragments. She changed a tire, cleaned tools, ran basic diagnostics on an old sedan, but her mind wasn't there. Every unfamiliar sound made her glance up. Every unfamiliar face made her tense. At one point, a man she didn't recognize stood near the edge of the lot, pretending to scroll through his phone. He stayed too long. Long enough for her to notice. When she looked directly at him, he lifted his head, met her eyes for half a second, then turned away and walked off. Her hands went cold. By the time her shift ended, the sky had begun to darken, heavy clouds rolling in from the west. Thunder rumbled faintly in the distance. The air felt charged, restless. At home, Angela noticed immediately. "You're quiet," her mother said, stirring a pot on the stove. "Quieter than usual." Imani shrugged, dropping her backpack by the door. "Just tired." Angela studied her, eyes soft but searching. "Something happened at work?" Imani hesitated. The truth pressed against her chest, begging to come out. But she didn't know where to start. How do you tell your mother that someone might have tried to murder a stranger, and now you might be in danger because you noticed? "It was intense," she said carefully. Angela nodded. "You don't have to tell me now." They ate dinner in near silence, rain beginning to tap against the windows. The sound was soothing at first, until a sudden crack of thunder made Imani flinch, her fork clattering against the plate. Angela froze. "Imani." "I'm okay," she said quickly, forcing a smile. "Just loud." Later, alone in her room, Imani lay on her bed staring at the ceiling. The rain intensified, drumming harder, faster. Her phone buzzed. This time it wasn't an unknown number. It was Jonathan Pierce. She stared at the screen for a long moment before answering. "Hello." "Imani," he said. His voice sounded different, lower, tighter. "I didn't know who else to call." Her heart began to race. "What's wrong?" "They moved my car," he said, "without notifying me where exactly. I tried to get details, but everything's vague." "That's not normal," she said quietly. "No," he agreed. "And there's something else." He hesitated. "I received a message. Anonymous. Just one sentence." Her breath caught. "What did it say?" He exhaled slowly. "You were warned." A chill spread through her. "I don't think this is about money anymore," Jonathan continued. "I think someone wanted to scare me. Or worse." "And now?" she asked. "And now I'm wondering," he said, "if you're safe." The question lingered between them, heavy and unsettling. "I don't know," she admitted. Another crack of thunder shook the house, lights flickering briefly. Imani sat up, heart pounding. "Imani," Jonathan said, urgency creeping into his voice, "if you notice anything strange, anything at all, you call me. Or Caleb. Don't ignore it." "I won't," she said, though fear pressed tight against her ribs. They ended the call shortly after, but sleep didn't come. She lay awake listening to the storm, every creak of the house sounding louder than it should. Sometime after midnight, the rain stopped. The sudden silence felt wrong. Imani rolled onto her side, eyes half closed, when a sound drifted through her window. Soft, metallic. Not thunder. Not rain. A car door closing. Her eyes snapped open. She sat up slowly, heart hammering, straining to listen. Outside, footsteps crunched softly on gravel. And they were getting closer. Imani didn't move. She sat upright in her bed, every muscle locked, listening. The house was too quiet now. No rain. No wind. Just the distant hum of the refrigerator and her own breathing, shallow and uneven. The footsteps outside stopped. She counted silently. 1, 2, 3. Nothing. Her heart pounded so hard she was sure whoever was out there could hear it. Slowly, carefully, she slid her feet onto the floor. The wood was cold beneath her toes. She crossed the room without turning on the light and peered through the narrow gap in the curtains. The street was empty. No car. No figure. Just the glow of a street lamp reflecting off wet pavement. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding and sank back against the wall, sliding down until she was sitting on the floor. Her hands shook uncontrollably now. Whether someone had actually been there or not almost didn't matter. Her body had already decided. Danger was real. That was the thing no one ever explained about trauma. It didn't wait for proof. She pressed her palms into her knees, grounding herself, and that was when the memory came back full force. Not gently. Not like a distant echo. It hit her the way it always did. Sudden, violent, impossible to ignore. She was 15 again. The car smelled wrong. They were on the highway late at night, her aunt humming softly to the radio as streetlights streaked past the windows. Imani had been half asleep in the back seat when the scent crept in, sharp, chemical, burning underneath everything else. "Auntie," she'd said, sitting up, "do you smell that?" "It's probably nothing," her aunt replied, eyes on the road. The smell grew stronger. Heat followed. Then a sound, an uneven rattling under the hood that made Imani's chest tighten. "Please," she'd said, panic threading her voice. "Please pull over." That was when the smoke came. Everything happened at once after that. The car swerved. Her aunt cursed, fighting the steering wheel as smoke flooded the cabin, thick and choking. Imani's eyes burned. Her lungs seized. She screamed as flames burst through the hood, orange and violent, lighting up the night like a warning flare. They barely made it to the shoulder before the fire spread. Imani remembered hands yanking at her seatbelt, the buckle burning her fingers as she struggled to release it. She remembered falling onto the pavement, coughing, her skin screaming as heat licked too close. She remembered the sound of metal popping, glass shattering, sirens wailing in the distance. She remembered thinking very clearly that she was going to die. The burn unit smelled sterile and sweet and wrong. Days blurred into weeks. Pain became her constant companion. Even after the wounds healed, something inside her stayed alert, forever listening for danger. Doctors said it was normal. Hyper-awareness. Sensory imprinting. Her aunt said God had spared her for a reason. Imani didn't know what she believed. All she knew was that ever since that night, certain smells made her stomach twist. Certain sounds made her freeze. And when something was about to go wrong, really wrong, her body knew before her mind did. That was why she'd known about Jonathan's car. Not because she was special. Because she'd survived. The memory loosened its grip slowly, leaving her exhausted, eyes burning, chest aching. She wiped her face with the back of her hand and stood, forcing herself to check the locks on the doors and windows. Everything was secure. Still, she didn't sleep. Morning came gray and heavy. Angela noticed immediately. "You look like you didn't close your eyes," her mother said, handing her a mug of coffee. "I didn't really," Imani admitted. Angela hesitated, then sat across from her. "You've been like this before." Imani stared into the mug, watching steam curl upward. "I know." "After the accident," Angela said gently. "The nightmares. The jumping at sounds." Imani's jaw tightened. "It's happening again." Angela reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "What happened, baby?" Imani almost told her. Almost. But the words stuck. Instead, she said, "I think someone might be in trouble. And I don't know how to walk away." Angela studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Then don't walk away. Just don't walk alone." Those words stayed with her all day. At the shop, Imani worked on autopilot. Every smell, every vibration passed through her heightened senses. Gordon noticed her distraction but said nothing. Just before lunch, her phone buzzed. "Caleb Morris." She stepped outside to answer. "Yeah. We found something," he said without preamble. "Something that confirms this wasn't random." Her pulse spiked. "What kind of something?" "The kind that suggests the first attempt wasn't meant to succeed," Caleb said. "It was meant to test a response." Imani closed her eyes briefly. "Test who?" There was a pause. "Jonathan," Caleb said. "And possibly you." Imani's grip tightened around the phone. The fire. The warning. The footsteps in the night. Suddenly, her past didn't feel like a coincidence anymore. It felt like preparation. And whatever was coming next wouldn't wait for her to be ready. Imani drove with both hands clenched around the steering wheel, knuckles pale, eyes flicking between the road and the rearview mirror. Every car that lingered too long behind her made her shoulders tense. Every red light felt like a trap. Caleb's words echoed in her head. It was meant to test a response. Test Jonathan. Possibly you. She replayed the moment on the road again and again. The way the engine sound had been wrong, the faint vibration she'd felt through the pavement, the smell that didn't belong. At the time it had felt personal. Now it felt targeted. She pulled into a grocery store parking lot and sat there, engine running, forcing herself to breathe. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. The way the therapist had taught her years ago. If someone was watching her, panicking wouldn't help. Her phone buzzed again. "Caleb, I don't want to say this over the phone. Can you come by the station?" Imani stared at the message. The police station wasn't a place she liked. Too many questions. Too much power imbalance. But curiosity, and something heavier, colder, pushed her forward. She typed back a short reply. "On my way." The station smelled like old coffee and disinfectant. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, making everything feel slightly unreal. Caleb met her near the front desk, his expression tight, jaw working as if he was chewing on something bitter. "This isn't official yet," he said as they walked. "I'm looping you in because you're already involved." "That's one way to put it," Imani said. He led her into a small interview room and closed the door. No mirror on the wall, no recorder on the table. That alone told her this conversation wasn't by the book. Caleb spread out a few photos. Close-ups of a car's undercarriage. Frayed wires. A small, scorched device no bigger than a matchbox. "This was found during a second inspection of Jonathan's vehicle," he said. "Not something you'd notice unless you knew where to look." Imani leaned closer, her stomach dropping. "What is it?" "A crude ignition interrupter," Caleb said, "with a delayed failure trigger." She frowned. "English." "It wasn't designed to kill him outright," he said. "It was designed to fail while the car was in motion. Create panic. Force a stop. See what happened next." Imani swallowed. "And if I hadn't been there?" Caleb didn't answer immediately. "You didn't have to." Her chest tightened. She thought of Jonathan's confused face when she'd yelled at him, the way his hand had trembled as he pulled over. He hadn't been ready for fear like that. Someone else would have frozen. Or kept driving. "So someone wanted to see how he'd react under pressure," she said. "And how I would." "Yes." "Why?" The word came out sharper than she meant. Caleb rubbed his face. "Jonathan's company has been quietly involved in a whistleblower case. Environmental violations. Big money. Bigger enemies. We believe someone's trying to scare him into backing off." "And me?" "You're an unknown variable," Caleb said. "A witness who doesn't fit the plan. Someone with instincts that complicate things." Imani let out a humorless laugh. "Great. I complicate things." "There's more," Caleb said. He slid one last photo toward her. A grainy still from a security camera. A hooded figure standing near a parked car late at night. The timestamp made her breath hitch. "That's my street," she said quietly. Caleb nodded. "We pulled footage from nearby cameras after you mentioned the footsteps. This person didn't approach your house. They stayed near your car. Long enough to check something. Then they left." "Check what?" Imani asked. Caleb's eyes held hers. "We don't know yet." Imani leaned back, pulse roaring in her ears. This wasn't just about Jonathan anymore. Someone had crossed an invisible line, stepping into her life, testing her boundaries. "When do I stop being collateral?" she asked. Caleb hesitated. "When we figure out why you matter to them." She stood abruptly. "I need air." Outside the sun felt too bright. Too normal. People walked past laughing, holding coffee cups, living lives untouched by hidden wires and late-night surveillance. Her phone rang. Jonathan. She stared at the screen for a moment before answering. "Hello." "Imani," he said, voice low. "We need to talk. In person." Her stomach tightened. "About what?" "There are things I didn't tell you," Jonathan said. "Things I thought I was protecting you from." Pause. Then quieter, "I think I was wrong." Imani closed her eyes. "Where?" she asked. "Somewhere public," he said. "And don't come alone." She hung up, the warning settling deep in her bones. Someone had been testing reactions. Now it felt like they were ready to escalate. The cafe Jonathan chose sat on a busy corner downtown, all glass windows and constant motion. People flowed in and out in a steady stream. Office workers on late lunches, college students hunched over laptops, a couple arguing softly near the door. It was the kind of place where nothing stayed still long enough to feel dangerous. Imani arrived early. She picked a table with her back to the wall and a clear view of the entrance. Old habits. Survival math. She ordered tea she didn't want and wrapped both hands around the warm cup just to give them something to do. Jonathan was 10 minutes late. Each minute stretched. Her mind filled the gaps with possibilities. Was he being followed? Had he changed his mind? Or worse, had someone else decided this meeting shouldn't happen? When he finally walked in, relief hit first, then concern. He looked smaller somehow. Not physically, but like a man whose confidence had been sanded down by too many quiet fears. His suit jacket was wrinkled, his tie loosened. He scanned the room before spotting her, his shoulders dropping a fraction when their eyes met. He didn't smile. "Thanks for coming," he said, sliding into the chair across from her. "You said not to come alone," Imani replied. "You didn't say why." Jonathan glanced toward the counter, then back to her. "Because if I say this wrong, I don't know what happens next." She studied him. "Then say it right." He exhaled slowly. "I didn't tell the police everything. And I didn't tell you anything at all." "That's a bad opening," she said quietly. "I know." He rubbed his hands together, a nervous habit that felt out of place on him. "The investigation Caleb mentioned, it's real. But it's not just environmental violations." Imani didn't interrupt. "My company consults for infrastructure projects," Jonathan continued. "Energy, transportation, waste management. The kind of work that looks clean on paper and gets dirty in execution." "And you knew," she said. "I suspected," he corrected. "For years. But suspicion is easy to live with. Proof is not." He reached into his briefcase and hesitated, eyes flicking to the people around them. Then he slid a slim folder across the table. "Don't open it here," he said. "Just listen." Imani kept her hands still. "3 months ago," Jonathan said, "one of our junior analysts disappeared. A woman named Talia. Smart. Careful. She'd been asking questions no one wanted answered." Imani's chest tightened. "Disappeared how?" "Stopped showing up. Phone disconnected. Apartment cleared out. Officially, she quit and moved abroad." "Unofficially?" Jonathan's jaw clenched. "Unofficially, she sent me something the night before she vanished." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Financial records. Internal memos. Proof that certain safety inspections were falsified. That materials deemed hazardous were being rerouted through shell companies." Imani felt a familiar cold spread through her stomach. "And you kept it?" "I encrypted it," Jonathan said. "Stored it offline. I told myself I was buying time. Time to do this carefully." "And someone noticed?" Imani said. "Yes." She thought of the device under his car. The delay. The test. "Why not go to the authorities immediately?" she asked. Jonathan's laugh was short and humorless. "Because the authorities aren't a single thing. And some of the names in those files wear badges." That landed heavy between them. Imani finally touched the folder, sliding it back toward him. "So where do I come in?" Jonathan hesitated. "Say it," she said. "I started asking around," he said. Quietly. "Looking for someone outside my world. Someone who'd notice things others ignore." Her eyes narrowed. "You're saying?" "I didn't set out to put you in danger," Jonathan said quickly. "But when I saw you react to the car, when I saw how sure you were, I realized you weren't just lucky." Imani's pulse thudded in her ears. "You were watching me." "Not like that," he said, wincing. "I asked about you. Your work. Your history. When I learned about the accident years ago." Her hands curled into fists beneath the table. "You recognized the signs," Jonathan said. "Because you'd lived them." Silence stretched. "You used me as a variable," Imani said flatly. "A test." Jonathan looked like he'd been slapped. "I didn't think they'd come after you directly." "But they did," she said. "They stood on my street. They checked my car." "I'm sorry," he said, and this time the words sounded like they hurt. "I should have told you sooner." Imani leaned back, forcing herself to breathe. Around them, the cafe buzzed on, oblivious. "What happens now?" she asked. Jonathan's voice dropped. "Now the files get released. Slowly. In pieces. Enough to make noise without painting a target too fast." "And me?" "I need you," he said. "Not as bait. As someone who sees what others miss. Someone they don't expect." Imani studied him for a long moment. Then her gaze drifted past his shoulder. A man stood across the street, pretending to check his phone. He hadn't moved since Jonathan sat down. Imani's chest tightened. She leaned forward, keeping her voice calm. "Jonathan," she said softly, "don't turn around." His eyes flicked, betraying him. "That man outside," she continued. "He's been watching us." Jonathan froze. And for the first time, the danger stopped feeling theoretical. Imani didn't look away from Jonathan as she spoke. "Keep your hands on the table," she said quietly. "Don't rush. Don't make eye contact with anyone you don't already know." Jonathan swallowed. His fingers trembled, but he obeyed. Outside, the man shifted his weight, still half hidden by the reflection in the cafe window. He lifted his phone, angled it slightly. Too deliberate to be casual. Imani's pulse stayed steady. Fear had burned itself out long ago and left behind something colder. Focus. Is this normal for you? Jonathan whispered. No, she said. But it's familiar. She reached for her tea, took a slow sip, then set the cup down with deliberate care. Anyone watching would see two people in conversation, nothing more. Caleb knows where I am, she said. I checked in before coming. That was only half true. She'd sent a vague text. But sometimes confidence mattered more than accuracy. Jonathan nodded once, jaw tight. The man outside turned, pretending to walk away, then stopped. His reflection caught the light again. Imani's phone vibrated in her pocket. A known number. She didn't answer. She slid the phone out just enough to see the screen. You shouldn't be here. Her breath caught for a fraction of a second. Then she locked the screen and slipped the phone back into her pocket without a change in expression. What is it? Jonathan asked. Nothing we can handle later, she said. The man outside started toward the door. Imani stood. Bathroom, she said loudly, offering a thin smile. Back in a minute. She walked away without waiting for Jonathan to respond, her steps unhurried. She passed the counter, the barista calling out names, the hiss of the espresso machine masking the sound of the door opening behind her. She turned down a narrow hallway instead of heading for the restroom. An exit sign glowed at the end. She pushed through the door and stepped into a service alley. Cold air slapped her face. Footsteps followed. Imani didn't run. She walked faster, then stopped abruptly, turning just as the man came into view. He was closer than she'd expected. Mid-30s. Clean jacket. The kind of face you forgot 5 minutes after seeing it. Wrong turn, he said lightly. Not for me, Imani replied. He glanced around, assessing. You're sharper than you look. So I've been told, she said. He smiled without warmth. You've made things complicated. That seems to be your theme. The man's smile thinned. Jonathan should stop digging. Tell him yourself, Imani said. He's good at listening. The man stepped closer. Not threatening. Not yet. This doesn't end well for people who keep pulling threads. Imani met his gaze. I already survived one fire. You think I scare easy? Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition. Or calculation. Her phone vibrated again. Unknown number. Last warning. She held the phone up so he could see it. You're bad at subtle. His jaw tightened. You don't know who you're dealing with. I know enough, she said. And I know this, you don't want attention. Not here. Not now. For a moment, neither of them moved. The alley seemed to hold its breath. Then distant sirens cut through the air. Faint but real. The man stepped back. This is on you. He turned and disappeared the way he'd come. Imani stood there for several seconds, heart pounding now that the danger had passed. Her hands shook as adrenaline caught up with her. She went back inside. Jonathan looked up, relief flooding his face when he saw her. What happened? Someone wanted to scare us, she said, sitting down. Again. Jonathan's phone buzzed almost immediately. He checked it, his face draining of color. They sent me something, he said. Imani leaned closer. What? A video, Jonathan whispered. From inside my house. Her stomach dropped. The screen showed his living room. The camera panned slowly, deliberately, before stopping on a single frame. The folder. On his desk. And a voice, calm and amused, spoke softly in the background. We know what you're holding. The video ended. Jonathan looked up at her, eyes wide. They were there. While we were here. Imani felt the ground shift beneath her. This wasn't a warning anymore. It was an invasion. And whoever was behind it had just proven how close they could get. Jonathan's apartment smelled wrong. That was the first thing Imani noticed when they arrived. An absence rather than a presence. No trace of the citrus cleaner he'd mentioned once, no faint cologne lingering in the air. Just stillness. Stale, flat, as if the space had been holding its breath. They stood just inside the doorway, neither of them moving. "Don't touch anything," Imani said. Jonathan nodded, eyes darting around the living room. The lights were on exactly as he'd left them. The couch cushions were neat. The framed photos on the shelf, his parents, a graduation shot, a candid with co-workers, were all in place. Two in place. "They didn't steal anything," he said quietly. "No," Imani replied. "They wanted you to know they were here." She scanned the room slowly, letting her senses lead. The hum of the refrigerator. The faint ticking of a wall clock. Her skin prickled, that familiar alertness rising. "Did you change your security codes recently?" she asked. Jonathan shook his head. "No one else has them." "Someone else has access," she said. "Those aren't the same thing." They moved deeper into the apartment. The bedroom was untouched. The bathroom immaculate. But when Imani stepped into Jonathan's home office, her chest tightened. The desk chair had been moved. Just slightly. Angled toward the door like someone had sat there waiting. "They watched the video," Jonathan murmured. "They stood right there." Imani crouched, eyes narrowing. On the carpet, near the desk leg, a faint scuff mark interrupted the fibers. Someone had shifted their weight. Waited. Her gaze lifted to the desk. The folder was still there. Untouched. "That's deliberate," she said. Jonathan laughed under his breath, brittle. "They could have taken everything. But they didn't," Imani said. "Because this isn't about the files." She stood slowly, turning to face him. "It's about control." Jonathan's shoulders slumped as the words sank in. "They want me to freeze." "Yes," she said. "And they want me to back off." He met her eyes. "Will you?" Imani didn't answer right away. She walked to the window and peered down at the street. A delivery truck idled at the curb. A woman walked her dog. Normal life, flowing on without noticing the tension coiled inside this apartment. "No," she said finally. "But we stop reacting." Jonathan frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means we stop doing what they expect," she said. "No panicked moves. No secret meetings in cafes. No predictable routines." She turned back to him. "And it means you tell me everything you haven't yet." Jonathan hesitated. "Everything," she repeated. He ran a hand through his hair, then nodded. "There's something else," he said. "Talia didn't just send me files." Imani waited. "She sent me a message," Jonathan continued. "A voice note. I didn't open it at first. I was afraid it might be tracked." "And now?" Imani asked. "And now," he said quietly, "I think it's the missing piece." He crossed to his desk, paused, then picked up his laptop. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling. "Once I play this," he said, "there's no going back." Imani stepped closer. "There hasn't been for a while." Jonathan nodded, then clicked play. Static filled the room at first. Then a woman's voice emerged, low and controlled, but threaded with urgency. "If you're hearing this, it means I didn't make it out clean." Imani's breath caught. "Talia," Jonathan whispered. "I don't have proof of everything yet," the voice continued, "but I have enough to know the accidents aren't accidents. They're rehearsals." Imani's spine went rigid. "They don't eliminate people right away," Talia said. "They scare them. Watch how they respond. Who steps in? Who notices?" Jonathan looked at Imani, horror dawning. "If someone intervenes," Talia continued, "they get flagged. Especially if they have a history of survival. People like that are harder to break." The recording crackled, then steadied. "They're not just protecting profits," Talia said. "They're refining a method." The audio cut off abruptly. Silence slammed back into the room. Jonathan's voice was barely audible. "A method for what?" Imani stared at the dark screen, her pulse roaring. For making disasters look natural, she said. And testing who can stop them. She thought of the device under the car. The delayed failure. The warning meant to provoke panic. She thought of herself. Her past. Her instincts. You weren't just a witness, Jonathan said slowly. You were a data point. Imani's jaw tightened. So were you. Jonathan closed the laptop, hands shaking. What do we do now? Imani looked around the room one last time at the chair angled just wrong, the untouched folder, the invisible audience that had already memorized this space. Now, she said, we assume they're listening. She reached into her pocket and turned her phone off. Somewhere nearby, something clicked. And in that small, sudden sound, Imani knew. This story had just crossed into a phase where mistakes wouldn't come with second chances. The click came again. Not loud. Not obvious. Just a soft, mechanical sound that didn't belong to the apartment. Imani's eyes lifted to the ceiling. Jonathan followed her gaze, his face draining of color. Was that? He started. Don't, Imani said quietly. Don't say it out loud. She moved slowly, deliberately, every step measured. Her pulse thudded in her ears, but her mind stayed sharp. Panic would be useful to whoever was listening. She crossed to the kitchen and opened a drawer, pretending to look for something mundane. Her fingers brushed against metal. She pulled out a small flashlight and clicked it on. Jonathan watched her, confused but silent. Imani swept the beam along the baseboards, the corners where walls met ceilings, the smoke detector above the stove. Nothing obvious. That didn't mean nothing was there. Grab your jacket, she said under her breath. Keys. Wallet. Only what's on your body. Jonathan hesitated. The files? Leave them, she said. They already know where those are. That landed hard. He nodded, swallowing, and did as she said. Imani moved to the door and paused, listening. The hallway outside was quiet. Too quiet. She opened the door and stepped out first, scanning left and right. The corridor smelled faintly of detergent and old carpet. No voices. No footsteps. Lock it, she whispered once Jonathan stepped out. But don't rush. They walked toward the stairwell instead of the elevator. Imani kept a steady pace, aware of every sound, their shoes on concrete steps, a distant door closing somewhere below, the hum of fluorescent lights. Halfway down, Jonathan whispered, "Where are we going?" "Somewhere unscripted," she said. "Somewhere they didn't plan for." They exited the building through a side door and stepped into the cool evening air. The street was quieter here, residential, lined with parked cars and trees stripped bare by winter. Imani didn't slow until they reached the end of the block. Then she stopped. Jonathan nearly collided with her. "Listen," she murmured. At first there was nothing. Then footsteps. Measured. Not hurried. Behind them. Imani turned slowly. A woman stood under a street lamp about 30 feet away. Dark coat. Hair pulled back. Hands visible at her sides. She wasn't hiding. "That's new," Jonathan whispered. The woman took a step forward. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." Her voice was calm. Professional. Like she was discussing a delayed flight. Imani met her gaze. "You're trespassing." The woman smiled faintly. "On whose property?" Jonathan stiffened beside her. "Who are you?" he demanded. "Someone cleaning up loose ends," the woman said. "You both qualify." Imani's chest tightened, but her voice stayed even. "You broke into his home. You threatened us." "Threatened?" The woman tilted her head. "No. We informed." She took another step closer. Imani noticed the subtle details. The way she positioned her feet, the lack of jewelry, the earpiece barely visible against her skin. Not a lone operator. "You shouldn't have played the recording," the woman said, eyes flicking briefly to Jonathan. "That was a mistake." "You mean the truth?" Jonathan snapped. "The truth is flexible," the woman replied. "Consequences are not." Imani shifted her weight, readying herself. "What do you want?" For you to step back, the woman said, looking directly at Imani now. You especially. Imani's stomach dropped. You don't belong in this, the woman continued. You survived something once. That doesn't make you qualified to interfere. Imani laughed softly. Funny. Your people seem very interested in how I react. The woman's smile faded. Just a fraction. You noticed, she said. That's kind of my thing, Imani replied. Silence stretched. A car passed at the far end of the street, headlights sweeping briefly over all three of them. The woman exhaled slowly. This is your last chance. Walk away. Go back to your life. Let the next failure happen without your input. Jonathan turned to Imani. Don't listen to her. Imani didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed on the woman. You're not asking, Imani said. You're offering an illusion of choice. The woman shrugged. Call it what you want. And if we say no? The woman's gaze hardened. Then the tests escalate. Imani felt a familiar cold settle into her bones. The kind that came right before something went very wrong. She nodded slowly. Okay. Jonathan stared at her. What? Okay, Imani repeated louder now. We'll stop. The woman studied her, suspicion flickering. Smart. Imani took Jonathan's arm and began walking past her, heart pounding. She didn't look back. She didn't speed up. They reached the corner before Jonathan hissed, What are you doing? Buying time, Imani whispered. And confirming something. Confirming what? Imani glanced over her shoulder. The woman was already gone. No one threatens people they don't need, Imani said. And no one asks twice unless they're unsure. Jonathan swallowed. Unsure of what? Imani's jaw tightened. Of how far I'll go, she said. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. This time it wasn't an unknown number. It was a location pin. Drop. What? And it wasn't theirs. It was moving. Imani's hands were still trembling when she glanced down at her phone. The location pin pulsed on the screen, shifting slowly across the map. Someone was moving. Someone was tracking them. Jonathan's breath hitched beside her. What is it? Not ours, Imani said, her eyes narrowing. And it's close. She dropped her phone back into her pocket and scanned the street. Empty. Quiet. Too quiet. Every instinct in her screamed that the calm wouldn't last. Where are we going? Jonathan asked, his voice tight. Imani didn't answer immediately. Instead, she led him down a series of side streets, alleys, and quiet residential blocks. Every step was calculated, slow, deliberate, designed to confuse anyone following them. She didn't glance back, but she felt it, eyes on them, subtle and invisible. Eventually, they reached a small park tucked between apartment buildings, its grass frosted over with early winter ice. The swings creaked gently in the wind. A single street lamp illuminated the path ahead, throwing long shadows across the ground. Sit, Imani said, motioning to a bench. We wait. Jonathan hesitated. For what? For them to make a move, she said. Or for us to see something we can't ignore. Minutes passed. The cold bit through her jacket, but she barely noticed. Her attention was on the shadows, the subtle noises, the faint crunch of footsteps on gravel that didn't belong. Then movement. A man appeared at the edge of the park, hood pulled low, hands stuffed in his pockets. He paused, scanning the area, then took a deliberate step closer. Imani felt her heart tighten. This wasn't the woman from before. This was someone else. A new player. Jonathan whispered, What do we do? Nothing yet, she said. Let him come to us. The man approached, slow, almost casual. But Imani could feel the tension in every step, the readiness to react. He stopped about 15 feet away. You're clever, he said, voice neutral. I'll give you that. And you are. Imani asked, her tone flat. Someone who knows how dangerous it can get when people like you interfere, he said. You and him both. He nodded toward Jonathan. But mostly you. Imani's jaw tightened. You're threatening me. Observation, he corrected. A statement of fact. You're too alert, too competent. You notice things most people would miss. And now you've seen things that weren't meant to be seen. Jonathan's voice cracked. We just want this to stop. The man's eyes flicked to him. You don't get to choose that anymore. Imani's mind raced. She needed information, a clue, something to turn the tables. She forced herself to stay calm. Why me? She asked quietly. Why involve someone who didn't ask for this? He tilted his head. Because you're different. You survive. And because when they test people, they need to see reactions. Yours is noteworthy. Her stomach churned. The realization hit. Every step of the fire, every near accident, every warning, it had all been data. Her instincts, her fears, her reactions, they'd been measured, studied, catalogued. Enough games, she said, voice low but sharp. Tell me what you want or leave. The man considered her for a long moment. Then he smiled faintly. I think you already know. You're about to get your next lesson. Whether you want it or not. Imani felt a rush of cold air as he stepped back into the shadows, disappearing before she could move. Jonathan exhaled shakily. That's insane. Imani didn't respond immediately. Her eyes were fixed on the darkened path where he had vanished. Insane is the understatement, she finally said. They're not just testing Jonathan. They've been testing us both. And now they're escalating. A sudden beep from her phone made her jump. She pulled it out. Another location pin. Moving faster this time. They're not waiting, she said, voice tight. They're leading us somewhere. Jonathan looked at her, panic rising. Somewhere dangerous? Imani's eyes hardened. I wouldn't call it dangerous. I'd call it unavoidable. She stood, motioning for Jonathan to follow. We go. And we get answers. As they walked through the park toward the direction of the moving pin, the wind carried the faintest sound, metal scraping against metal. Subtle, quick, but unmistakable. Imani froze mid-step. They're close. Too close. Jonathan grabbed her arm. Imani. Don't speak, she whispered. Just watch. Shadows shifted ahead. The first real confrontation was approaching. And for the first time, Imani realized this wasn't just about fires, files, or warnings. It was about control, power, and who could survive when someone else was pulling the strings. A figure emerged from the darkness at the end of the path. This one wasn't hiding. This one wasn't testing. This one was ready. And the game had just become deadly. Imani's pulse was hammering in her ears as she and Jonathan approached the figure at the end of the path. The street lamp overhead cast long shadows, stretching the silhouette into something almost monstrous, though she knew better. The man, or woman she couldn't tell immediately, stood perfectly still, hands by their sides as if waiting for them to make the first move. The air was sharp with cold, carrying a faint metallic scent that made her stomach twist. Stop, the figure said calmly. Don't come any closer. Imani stopped, instinct telling her to pause, not to provoke. Jonathan froze behind her, eyes wide, jaw tight. Why are you doing this? She asked, her voice low but steady. Who are you? The figure tilted their head slightly, considering. I'm someone who ensures the rules are followed. And you've broken them. Jonathan's voice cracked. We didn't. You saw too much, the figure interrupted. You interfered where you shouldn't have. That folder. The recordings. Your reactions have been logged. Measured. And now, there's a choice to be made. Imani's stomach sank. A choice? She asked. Yes, the figure said. You can walk away. Pretend you never saw anything. Live your life as if the tests never happened. And if we don't? Jonathan's voice was shaky but determined. The figure smiled faintly, almost amused. Then you face the consequences of curiosity. And resistance. Imani's mind raced. Every step, every warning, every near miss, it all led here. And she realized something terrifying. These people weren't just testing Jonathan's compliance. They were using them both as pawns, measuring responses, predicting actions. "You've been watching us for months," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Tracking our routines, our reactions. You've been everywhere we go." The figure didn't answer immediately. Instead, they reached into their coat and pulled out a small black device. It looked innocuous, like a remote control, but Imani could feel its weight, metaphorically and physically, in the tension it created. "This," the figure said, holding it up, "is the next step. If you follow the instructions exactly, no harm comes to either of you. Deviate and—" their hand flicked toward the device. The implication was clear. Jonathan swallowed hard. Instructions for what? Imani felt her chest tighten. Her mind ran through every possibility. This was no longer about files or warnings. This was a test of obedience, survival, and courage. "Go," the figure said finally, voice sharp now. "Follow the path indicated. Do not deviate. And know this, someone is always watching. Always." The figure stepped back into the shadows, disappearing as quickly as they had appeared. Imani glanced at the device still in her hand. It vibrated softly, a GPS-like map lighting up the small screen. A path was highlighted in red, twisting through unfamiliar streets. Jonathan looked at her. "We have to follow it?" "Yes," she said, voice tight. "But we do it carefully. And we stay alert. Every step could be a test. Every turn could be a trap." They began moving, following the red path. The streets were eerily quiet, almost deserted, though the city should have been awake at this hour. Every shadow seemed like a potential observer. Every rustle of leaves, every distant car horn set her nerves on edge. As they turned a corner, the device vibrated again. A new pin appeared. Closer. Moving toward them. Imani's stomach dropped. "They're not just guiding us," she whispered. "They're tracking us. And whoever's coming, they're testing reactions again." Jonathan's hand found hers. He squeezed it, a silent acknowledgement of fear and trust. Imani's mind went through options, contingencies, escape routes, but she knew something. Whoever was behind this wasn't just testing strength or courage. They were studying instinct, decision-making under pressure, fear, and composure. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "We need to reach the destination before they corner us. And we need to stay unseen." Jonathan nodded, swallowing hard. "And if we can't?" Imani's eyes hardened. "Then we make them regret underestimating us." Ahead, the streetlights flickered, throwing shadows in odd angles. And somewhere in those shadows, a figure was moving. Closer. Silent. Watching. The game had escalated far beyond anything she had imagined. And Imani realized with a cold clarity that this was the point of no return. One wrong step, one hesitation, and everything could unravel. And someone wanted to see exactly how they'd handle it. The red path on the device led them into an older industrial district, the kind of place the city forgot about once offices and apartments took over the skyline. Warehouses sat shoulder to shoulder, their brick faces scarred with graffiti and rusted fire escapes. The air smelled like oil and damp concrete. Imani slowed her pace without stopping. "Count the lights," she murmured. "Every third one is out." Jonathan glanced up, then back at her. "You notice that fast?" "I notice patterns," she said. "So do they." The device vibrated again. The destination was close now. Too close. They passed a chain-link fence topped with bent wire. Beyond it, an empty loading yard stretched wide and dark. A single warehouse at the far end glowed faintly, one light on above a side door. Imani's chest tightened. "That's it," Jonathan whispered. "Looks like it," she replied. They stopped at the edge of the yard. Imani scanned left, then right. No movement. No obvious cameras. That didn't mean anything. "Before we go in," Jonathan said quietly, "I need to ask something." Imani didn't look at him. "Make it fast. If this goes bad, he said, voice tight. Was it worth it? She finally turned to face him. The streetlight caught the edge of her face. The faint scar near her jawline she rarely remembered was there. I don't know yet, she said honestly. But walking away would have haunted me longer. Jonathan nodded. Fair. They crossed the yard. Halfway there the device buzzed sharply, then went dark. Imani stopped instantly. That wasn't supposed to happen. What does it mean? Jonathan asked. It means we've reached the point where they don't need to guide us anymore, she said. From here on out, they're watching what we choose. The side door creaked open with a low groan when she pushed it. Inside, the warehouse was cavernous and mostly empty. Tall shelves lined the walls, stripped bare except for dust and old labels. The overhead lights were on, but only every other one, casting uneven pools of brightness across the concrete floor. Their footsteps echoed. Imani hated that. In the center of the space sat a folding table. 2 chairs. And on the table, a laptop already open. Jonathan let out a shaky breath. They're really committed to the theatrics. Imani didn't smile. This isn't theater. This is observation. They approached slowly. The laptop screen flickered, then resolved into a live video feed. Imani's stomach dropped. It was her street. Her house. The camera angle was wrong, higher than normal, angled slightly downward. Mounted somewhere she'd never thought to check. Jonathan sucked in a breath. They're watching your place. Right now. And they want me to know it, Imani said. Text appeared on the screen. Sit. She didn't move. Another line appeared. This isn't optional. Imani's jaw tightened. She pulled out a chair and sat, posture relaxed even though her muscles were screaming. Jonathan hesitated, then sat across from her. The screen split into 4 sections. One showed Jonathan's apartment building. Another showed the cafe from earlier that day. The third showed a grainy feed of the park. The fourth stayed black. A voice came through the laptop speakers. Come. Familiar. You're quicker than we expected. Imani recognized it immediately. The woman from the street. What do you want? Imani asked. To see how you reason, the woman said. When the pressure is real. Jonathan leaned forward. This is illegal. Pause. Then a soft laugh. So is what you're sitting on. The black screen flickered to life. Imani's breath caught. It was the inside of a car. Not Jonathan's. Not hers. A different make. Older. The camera angle was low, tucked near the pedals. Whose car is that? Jonathan demanded. The woman's voice didn't change. Someone adjacent. Someone who didn't listen the first time. Imani's hands clenched under the table. You said you don't eliminate people right away. We don't, the woman replied. We create conditions. Outcomes depend on choices. Text appeared on the screen again. You can stop this. Jonathan turned to Imani. What does that mean? Imani stared at the screen, her mind racing. It means they want something from me. Not you. Me. The woman spoke again. You have a gift for anticipation. For intervention. We want to understand its limits. And the car? Imani asked. Is the variable, the woman said. Just like you were. The engine in the video turned over. Imani's pulse spiked. She leaned closer to the screen, scanning every detail, the dashboard vibration, the way the engine idled too roughly. She knew that sound. Her voice dropped. There's something wrong with that car. The woman paused. Just a beat too long. Imani felt a chill crawl up her spine. Tell us what you see, the woman said, and decide how far you're willing to go to stop it. On the screen the car shifted into gear. And somewhere far away, a driver who had no idea they were part of this pressed the accelerator. The sound of the engine on the laptop made Imani's stomach twist. She didn't need to see the person behind the wheel to know this was serious. Every instinct, every lesson from her past, screamed that someone could be hurt. Jonathan leaned forward, gripping the edge of the table. We can't just sit here. That car, someone's in it. Imani shook her head slowly. We don't know exactly where it is. And even if we did, rushing in could make it worse. The woman's voice filled the warehouse again, calm and deliberate. Observation is crucial. Your reactions determine the next scenario. Will you panic? Freeze? Intervene effectively? Imani clenched her fists under the table. We're not your experiment. Oh, you already are, the woman replied. Whether you accept it or not. Jonathan's voice wavered. What do we do? Imani thought fast. The video feed showed the car approaching a junction, the driver unaware of a deliberately sabotaged intersection. She could see the faint outline of a device beneath the steering column, a replica of the delayed ignition trigger she had encountered in Jonathan's car. They want to see if I notice, she said, more to herself than to Jonathan. They want to know if I can stop this without panicking. Jonathan's eyes widened. And if you fail? Imani's lips pressed into a thin line. Then someone else might get hurt. Or worse. She scanned the laptop quickly. The feed had a map overlay in one corner. Coordinates. Real-time location. They weren't guessing. The car was somewhere in the northern industrial sector, moving fast, and the device beneath the steering column was rigged to fail in a matter of minutes. Okay, she said, standing abruptly. We go. Jonathan rose immediately. Go? Where? We don't even know where it is exactly. Imani grabbed her coat. We follow the map. The coordinates. We get there before the device triggers. The warehouse suddenly felt smaller, tighter. The shadows seemed to crawl along the walls. Every second counted. She pulled out her phone, opened the GPS app linked to the video feed, and the red dot moved. Faster now. She felt the cold edge of fear tighten around her, but she pushed it down. Focus. Breathe. Jonathan followed, glancing nervously at her. Do you even know what you're doing? Imani didn't answer. She never liked answering questions like that. She only moved. Outside, the wind was sharper, carrying the faint smell of burning oil and damp asphalt. The streets were quieter than normal for this time of evening. Too quiet. She knew the person in the car wouldn't notice it, but she did. Every sound, every subtle cue mattered. They turned down an abandoned street, the red dot blinking faster on her phone. Her chest tightened with anticipation. Jonathan whispered, "What if we're too late?" Imani didn't reply. Her eyes were fixed on the screen, tracking the vehicle's every movement. The car was approaching a sharp bend ahead, one that would be fatal if the delayed ignition triggered. She reached into her pocket, feeling for something. Her fingers brushed the small multi-tool she always carried, her lifeline in situations like this. "This is it," she said, voice low. "We're at the point where hesitation will get someone hurt. You ready?" Jonathan swallowed hard, nodding. "Ready." Imani's eyes flicked to the approaching car on the map. She could almost hear the tires gripping the asphalt, almost feel the surge of panic that the driver didn't know was coming. Her hands tightened around her phone. This wasn't a test anymore. It was real. Someone's life depended on her next move, and she knew that one wrong decision could change everything. The car neared the bend. Imani's breath caught, and then, the device under the steering column began to spark. The sparks on the screen made Imani's stomach drop. She didn't have the luxury of panic. Every second mattered. "Jonathan," she said sharply, "listen to me. I need you to stay calm and keep your phone line open. If anything goes wrong, I'll guide you." His face was pale, eyes wide, but he nodded. Okay, what do I do?" Imani ignored him for now, eyes glued to the map overlay. The car's speed was steady, but the device beneath the steering column was now visibly malfunctioning, tiny arcs of electricity dancing across wires in the video feed. A catastrophic failure was imminent if the driver didn't slow down. "Jonathan," she said finally, "we need to trace this to the driver. We can't just sit here." He leaned closer, phone in hand. "How?" "We don't know where he is exactly, just a general area." Imani's mind raced. The red dot on her phone blinked, pulsing slightly faster. That was a clue. Whoever set this up hadn't accounted for variable GPS lag. The device's signal was strongest along one path. She traced it carefully. There, she whispered, pointing. The northern stretch. That industrial alley. If we move fast, we can intercept. Jonathan swallowed hard. Move fast? We don't have a car. Imani's jaw tightened. Then we run. We improvise. We don't give them a chance to see what we're doing. They sprinted down the dimly lit streets, shadows flickering across walls from occasional streetlights. Her boots hit concrete hard, heart hammering in sync with each step. Jonathan struggled to keep pace, but she didn't slow. Not yet. The red dot on her phone flashed again. The car was making a turn onto the alley. Imani pushed harder. That's it. That's the turn. They arrived at the alley and froze, catching their breath. Ahead, the car was idling, the driver unaware of the danger under the dashboard. Sparks were now visible through the floorboard. The device was moments from triggering. Imani crouched beside a dumpster, scanning the car. Her mind raced. There was no way to physically open the car without alerting the driver, and she didn't have time to call authorities without the woman from earlier intercepting the feed. She exhaled slowly, forcing herself to think. This was about precision, about anticipating the malfunction, about timing. Her fingers brushed her pocket again, feeling for the multi-tool. You know what you have to do, Jonathan said, his voice trembling. Imani nodded without looking at him. I do. But we have one shot. If I miscalculate... She swallowed hard. The driver's foot was inching toward the accelerator, completely unaware of the sparks crawling closer to ignition. The air smelled faintly of ozone through the video feed. She imagined it real enough to feel it on her skin. Watch closely, she whispered. I'll guide you. Jonathan nodded. Okay. Imani moved as carefully as a shadow, circling the alley. She needed to reach the car from the side, access the wires without the driver seeing or panicking. Her hands were steady despite the adrenaline. Every second mattered. A tiny spark jumped higher, closer to the gas line. Imani pressed the edge of the multi-tool against the device, testing the metal. She could reroute the circuit just enough to prevent ignition, but not enough to destroy the evidence. It was delicate work. Jonathan watched, silent, clutching his phone like a lifeline. A soft beep from her device told her she had 1 minute. 1 minute before the rig would go off, potentially causing the driver to crash. Almost there, she whispered, every nerve alive. The sparks arced again. Her hand moved deliberately, wire by wire. She rerouted the current, redirecting it safely into a small insulated loop she'd created with the tool. The sparks died instantly. Imani exhaled, tension finally releasing. The driver, still oblivious, tapped the dashboard, muttered something under his breath, and drove off slowly, unaware of how close he had come. Jonathan let out a long, shaky breath. You saved him. Imani didn't smile. Her mind was still racing, scanning the shadows, wondering who was watching this next, who would escalate again. The woman's voice crackled through the phone once more. Come. Observant. Interesting. Very interesting. Imani's jaw tightened. That was real. That could have killed someone. Yes, the voice replied. And yet, you reacted as we predicted. Precise. Controlled. Alert. Impressive. Jonathan looked at her, awe and fear tangled on his face. They wanted to see if you could handle it? Imani's lips pressed together. They wanted to see if I'd intervene, without panicking. And I did. But they're not done. The shadows around the alley seemed to stretch longer as the wind rustled. And Imani knew with certainty that the game had escalated far beyond anything she'd faced before. Someone was always watching. And next time they wouldn't give her a second chance. The alley felt different once the car disappeared. Quieter. Emptier. As if the city itself had stepped back to watch what would happen next. Imani straightened slowly, every muscle still coiled. She didn't celebrate. She didn't relax. Saving the driver hadn't ended anything, it had just proven something. Jonathan wiped his face with both hands. That was real. I saw the sparks. I saw your hands shaking. They were steady where it mattered, Imani said. That's what they wanted to see. The phone in Jonathan's hand vibrated once, then went still. No more messages, he said. No voice. Nothing. Imani frowned. Silence like that was never neutral. It meant a decision had already been made. Let's move, she said. Standing still is an invitation. They left the alley and walked several blocks without speaking. Every passing car made Jonathan flinch. Every shadow caught his attention. For Imani, the world had narrowed to inputs: sound, movement, timing. Her nervous system was fully awake. Finally, Jonathan broke the silence. They said they don't eliminate people right away. Imani glanced at him. That doesn't mean they never do. They reached a main road where traffic thinned but didn't disappear entirely. Imani stopped near a bus stop, using the glass shelter as a mirror to scan behind them. Nothing obvious. Jonathan swallowed. What happens now? Imani considered the question carefully. Now they reassess. Us. Me, she corrected. You were leverage. I'm the variable. Jonathan's jaw tightened. I don't like that. Neither do I. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. This time there was no dramatic sound cue, no countdown. Just a single notification. She pulled it out. A message. No number. You passed. Jonathan read it over her shoulder. Passed what? The live test, Imani said quietly. Another message arrived immediately. But curiosity has a cost. Imani felt a cold weight settle in her chest. Here it is. The screen changed. Not to a video. To a document. Names. Dates. Locations. Jonathan leaned closer. What is that? A list, Imani said. People involved in past incidents. Car failures. Structural collapses. Industrial fires. All ruled accidental. Jonathan scanned the names, his breath hitching. Some of these cases, I remember them. They were on the news. Yes, Imani said. Briefly. Then forgotten. At the bottom of the list was a new section. Observed interveners. 2 names. Jonathan's was there. And below it, Imani froze. Her own name. Jonathan looked at her. They've cataloged you. They've been doing that for a while, she said. A third message appeared. We don't want to stop you. We want to understand you. Jonathan laughed, a sharp, broken sound. That's insane. No, Imani said. That's worse. She scrolled. There were notes beside her name. Behavioral markers. Response time. Sensory triggers. Trauma-linked pattern recognition. They knew about the fire. Not the headline. Not the accident report. The aftermath. Jonathan's voice dropped. How could they know that much? Imani felt something shift inside her. Anger, yes, but beneath it, clarity. Because someone told them, she said. Jonathan went still. Who? She didn't answer right away. Her mind replayed the past weeks. The access. The questions that had seemed harmless. The conversations framed as concern. Guilt. Jonathan saw the realization hit her face. You think the detective. I think he's not just a detective, Imani said. Or not just working for one side. Her phone vibrated again. A final message. You can expose us. But understand this. When systems break, people get hurt. You stop one disaster. We cause 10 more. Jonathan felt sick. They're daring you. They're negotiating, Imani corrected. She locked the phone and looked up at the city lights stretching endlessly ahead. Ordinary people. Ordinary nights. Lives balanced on mechanisms most would never see. They think I'll back off, she said. Jonathan searched her face. Will you? Imani thought of the driver who would never know how close he'd come to dying. Of the people on that list. Of herself, 15 years old, choking on smoke while adults told her everything would be fine. "No," she said softly. "But I won't play their game either." Jonathan exhaled shakily. "Then what do we do?" Imani met his eyes, resolve hardening. "We change the rules. Somewhere far away or maybe very close," a system recalculated. And for the first time since this began, the people watching Imani weren't studying her reactions anymore. They were preparing for resistance. They didn't go home. That was the first rule Imani set. "No predictable patterns," she said as they walked away from the bus stop. "No apartments. No offices. No places they've already mapped." Jonathan nodded, still shaken. "Then where?" Imani scanned the street. Across the road, a 24-hour laundromat buzzed with fluorescent light. A few people sat inside, half awake, watching machines spin in endless circles. "Somewhere ordinary," she said. "Ordinary is camouflage." They crossed and stepped inside. The smell of detergent and warm metal wrapped around them. Machines hummed. A television in the corner played a muted late-night talk show. Imani chose a plastic chair near the back wall, angled so she could see both the door and the reflection in the glass. Jonathan sat beside her. "You really think Caleb's involved?" Imani didn't answer immediately. She replayed every interaction with him. The way he always had just enough information. The way he warned but never intervened. The way he'd position himself as helpful. "They said someone told them about my past," she said quietly. "Details not in public records. Not in headlines. Things only a case file would have." Jonathan's face tightened. "Police have access to those." "Yes." "And if he's not dirty?" Jonathan asked. "If he's just being used?" "Then we find out," she said. "But we don't confront him blindly." Jonathan leaned forward, elbows on knees. "They think if we expose them they'll escalate. Cause more accidents." "They will," Imani said. "Because their leverage is fear." She looked at him. "So we remove the fear." He blinked. "How?" Imani pulled out her phone again, reopening the document with the list of incidents. She scrolled slowly, eyes sharp. "They operate in patterns," she said. "Controlled chaos. Small-scale failures that can be explained away." Jonathan nodded slowly. "They don't want mass casualties," she continued. "They want controllable events. Data points. Warnings. So if we shine light on the pattern, they lose control of the narrative," Imani finished. Jonathan's brow furrowed. "But if Caleb is compromised, who do we trust?" Imani's eyes drifted to the muted TV in the corner. A news ticker scrolled along the bottom. Familiar logo. Investigative segment coming up at the top of the hour. An idea sparked. "Not the police," she said. "Not internally." Jonathan followed her gaze to the TV. His eyes widened slightly. "Media?" "Not just media," she corrected. "Independent investigative media. People who don't answer to the same systems." Jonathan hesitated. "That's risky." "So is letting them control the tempo," she said. A dryer buzzer went off loudly, making Jonathan flinch. Imani didn't. Her mind was already moving ahead. "They think I'll act impulsively," she said. "Confront them. Expose them recklessly." "But you won't," Jonathan said. "No," she replied. "I'll gather." She began taking screenshots. Names. Dates. Locations. She cross-referenced with public news archives. The pattern became clearer with each match. Industrial sectors tied to Jonathan's consulting network. Near misses labeled mechanical failure. Survivors who reported strange noises before incidents. Jonathan stared at the growing web on her screen. "This is bigger than I thought." "It always was," she said quietly. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Caleb. "Where are you? We need to talk. Urgent." Imani's jaw tightened. Jonathan saw the name. "Speak of the devil." She didn't respond to the message. Instead, another text came through. You're not safe tonight. Let me help. Imani stared at the words. It was the tone that bothered her. Not concern. Not command. Control. He knows something happened, Jonathan said. Maybe he saw the movement. Or he was told, Imani replied. Jonathan swallowed. Are we meeting him? Imani considered the options. Avoiding him might confirm suspicion. Meeting him might confirm betrayal. We meet, she said finally. But not on his terms. Jonathan exhaled slowly. You're playing a dangerous game. Imani looked at him steadily. No. I'm ending one. She typed back a reply. Public place. 15 minutes. Bring nothing electronic. 3 dots appeared almost instantly. Agreed. Jonathan stared at her. You think he'll actually come without a wire? Imani stood, slipping her phone back into her pocket. No, she said. But I think he'll underestimate how much I already know. They stepped out of the laundromat into the cold night air. Somewhere someone was still watching. Still calculating. But for the first time the variables were shifting. And as they walked toward the meeting point, Imani couldn't shake one thought. If Caleb was truly on the other side, this conversation wouldn't just expose corruption. It would expose who had been studying her from the very beginning. The rain started just before dawn. Not heavy. Not dramatic. Just steady enough to blur the edges of the city and make everything look softer than it really was. Imani stood by her window, watching the drops trace silent paths down the glass. Her phone lay on the table behind her. Screen dark. Quiet. Too quiet. Jonathan sat on the couch, elbows on his knees, staring at a laptop filled with copied files. The list. The names. The patterns. Everything they had pulled before the system cut direct contact. They haven't reached out in 12 hours, he said. They don't need to, Imani replied. Silence again. The last message still echoed in her mind. You can expose us. But understand this, when systems break, people get hurt. It wasn't just a threat. It was a calculation. Imani turned from the window. They're betting on me. Betting how? Jonathan asked. That I care too much about collateral damage. Jonathan closed the laptop slowly. Don't you? I do, she said. That's why they think they control me. The room felt small. Heavy with decision. Jonathan stood. If we leak everything, they'll retaliate. If we stay quiet, they continue. Either way, people get hurt. Imani nodded once. So we don't choose either option. Jonathan blinked. What does that even mean? She picked up her phone. We don't destroy the system, she said calmly. We expose its predictability. Jonathan frowned. You're going to warn them? No, Imani said. I'm going to outpace them. She unlocked the screen and opened a new message. No number. Just the same empty sender. Imani typed slowly. You rely on controlled chaos. You think disruption hides inside noise. You're wrong. Jonathan watched her. You're provoking them. I'm inviting them. She hit send. The response came faster than expected. Explain. Imani felt something shift, not fear. Not anger. Power. You study patterns, she typed. So do I. Jonathan's pulse quickened. Imani, she continued. You create crises to maintain stability. But your models depend on reaction time. Mine doesn't. Several seconds passed. Then, clarify. Imani inhaled. You want to understand me? She whispered. She began typing again. You design disasters that can be solved. You make heroes necessary. But what happens when intervention becomes simultaneous? Jonathan's eyes widened. You're not just saving people anymore. No, she said. I'm synchronizing. Over the past hours, she had done more than analyze files. She had sent anonymous alerts. Small, precise warnings to mechanics, inspectors, dispatch units. Not accusations. Not exposure. Just anomalies. A brake system flagged twice in the same week. A faulty valve in an industrial warehouse. A structural stress point marked as within tolerance but trending wrong. Nothing dramatic. Nothing traceable to her. But enough to interrupt the timing. The phone buzzed. Impossible. Imani smiled faintly. No. Just inconvenient. You cannot anticipate everything. She typed back. I don't need to. I just need to remove your advantage. Jonathan stepped closer. You're turning their chaos into noise. Exactly. If every potential incident was quietly corrected before escalation, the system lost its leverage. It could no longer threaten 10 disasters to protect one, because the 10 would fail before ignition. Minutes passed. No reply. Jonathan exhaled. Did we just win? Imani shook her head. Systems don't lose. They adapt. As if summoned, the phone lit up again. You misunderstand us. We are not the villain. Imani stared at the message. Here it comes, Jonathan muttered. Another message followed. We prevent worse outcomes. We allow small harm to stop catastrophic collapse. Imani felt the weight of that argument. It wasn't cartoon evil. It was cold philosophy. Jonathan whispered, What if they're telling the truth? Imani closed her eyes for a second. She saw the driver from the alley. The names on the list. The fire from years ago. No one gets to decide acceptable loss in the dark, she said. She typed her final message. Then come into the light. 3 dots appeared on the screen. Then disappeared. Then appeared again. Finally. If we do, you will see what keeps you alive. Imani's heart slowed instead of racing. Good, she said softly. Show me. The screen went black. Not a glitch. Disconnected. Jonathan swallowed. What did that mean? Imani walked back to the window. The rain had stopped. The city looked sharper now. Edges defined again. It means, she said quietly, they're thinking. Jonathan gave a small, disbelieving laugh. So that's it? We wait. Imani shook her head. No. Her phone vibrated once more. Not the anonymous contact. A different notification. City infrastructure alert. Multiple maintenance reviews initiated overnight. Jonathan stared at her. That was you. It was information, she corrected. Far away, in rooms filled with screens and silent observers, something subtle was happening. Not collapse. Not retaliation. Recalibration. For the first time, the system wasn't studying Imani to measure her limits. It was adjusting to her existence. Jonathan looked at her carefully. You realize they'll keep watching. I know, she said. And you're okay with that? Imani considered the question. No, she said honestly. But I'm not afraid of it anymore. She wasn't alone in the dark anymore. The shadows knew she could see them. And that changed the equation. The phone stayed silent. No victory speech. No dramatic takedown. No explosion. Just a city waking up to a normal morning, unaware of how close it had come to something else. Imani stepped away from the window. Come on, she told Jonathan. There's work to do. He gave her a faint smile. What kind? She opened the door. The kind that doesn't wait for disasters. Outside, the streets glistened under new sunlight. Cars moved. People walked. Life continued, unaware that a quiet war had shifted overnight. Somewhere in the unseen architecture of power, a new variable had been introduced. Not destruction. Not chaos. Interference. And as the city breathed in the morning air, one truth settled into place. The system had met its anomaly, and it would never be the same again.